Please welcome the incredible Danielle Laporte.
Hello, hello. I'm coming at you from the tail end of my honeymoon.
Ugh, I know. It's like the best gift you can give the listeners is that you squeezed us in on a very important part of your life.
Yeah, yeah. Mhm.
What a beautiful little ceremony that you shared online. Where'd you guys get married?
We got married in Vancouver in Yale Town at this kind of restaurant situation. And the idea was like one stop, we do it all. We want to have ceremony, dinner, dancing, one place. I just wanted like this cozy container where we were all together for a night. We had about 70-ish people and
Mm.
we created a really meaningful ceremony in a really like urban, cool space. And yeah, lots of people said, I mean, this sounds so branding my wedding, but many people who were in attendance said, it was one of the most moving weddings they'd been to. Yeah.
Well, you have that gift
Mm,
to make it moving and healing.
oh, love.
Um,
Yeah. And I got a guy who's game. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
So now you're in Tofino, where my husband and I were just a couple days ago,
Mm,
which is crazy.
mm.
I had never been,
Okay.
but nope. I heard it was a magical place, and now you guys are just chilling,
Yeah.
honeymoon.
Yeah, we wanted to keep it simple and just be in nature and easy, cozy, lots of cheese and chocolate and sleep and time and love and burritos. Yeah,
Fritas and beaches
yeah.
and sand. And so the juxtaposition is for us, it's kind of like Kelowna's the desert. So it's very dry, except it's been raining like crazy. And Tofino is like a rainforest.
Mhm, mhm.
It is so magical. Um, I was obsessed with looking out the window and seeing all the trees and the flowers and the leaves, and it was like a jungle. I
Mhm.
did not know this existed. And I heard and I was taught about these things called the banana. Um, what's it like? Those little creatures. It's like a slug, the banana
Oh, the
slug. Have
banana
you,
slugs. Yeah, welcome to the West Coast. Yeah.
so it's a yellow slug that's the size of half my hand.
Mhm,
And I was walking through the little pathway to get to the beach. And I
mhm.
saw this thing. I'm like, and his little tentacles were out. I was like, oh, this thing's cute. And I was eating an apple. I'm like, I'll give him a little piece of my apple. Let's just see what happens. And he ate it or absorbed it like an amoeba or something happened.
Like a banana slug. Yeah,
Yeah. It's like
nature's
this
amazing. Yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
So what a great place to decompress. But anyway, there's so many things we could talk about. First of all, I discovered you way back in like your Desire Map days. How long ago was that?
Desire Map is about 8, 10 years ago now. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah.
And I think I attended because people would host events, right? And they'd go through some of the what are those like facilitators? Who are these people? I can't remember.
Yeah, so I licensed that methodology for a
Yes.
period of time, and that turned into hundreds of facilitators in like over 30 countries. There was a point in time where we could say every weekend somewhere in the world there was a Desire Map workshop. And then I grew and
Mm.
I had some insights. And so, like, the driving question of Desire Map was, how do you want to feel?
Yeah.
And I had a revelation, which was like my meaningfulness, a purposeful life was not predicated on me being in a good mood. And the question changed and it became, what do you want to embody? And so I made this move. I still remember the Zoom call we were in where I said to my community of facilitators, like, I've had this shift and I think we're moving from all things desire map to all things being heart centered. And I don't know where we're going. I don't know what it's going to look like, but will you trust me and come with me? And most of them did. And like I hadn't even, and this is kind of, um, it's turned out to be a bit of a pattern. Like I would get into these calls with our groups, with our cohorts, and not have any agenda. And I just say, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but we're going to change everything. And the brand is changing and we're all switching. And I've learned that like that is actually a power play for me. Like when something feels like really alive and I'm lit up by it, that enthusiasm sort of shows me the next right step and the next right step. So, yeah, Desire Map 10 years ago, now it's all things heart centered leadership, membership, which is more about embodiment and virtue and less about how you want to feel. How you want to feel is still super important, but it's not where we stop. I could see it was stopping a lot of people's growth arc, which is like, wow, this feels good, this doesn't feel good. Yeah, well, cool. There's more.
And then you kind of extended on that more. You expanded on that more. Because I remember taking that notion and going to my weekly meetings with my husband and our quarterly couples retreats. And the end of those retreats was the question, how do you want to feel this year?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think it was beautiful, and it still is in that moment, because I never asked that question of myself.
Yeah.
And I also never asked that question of my husband.
Yeah.
Like, how do you actually want to feel?
Yeah.
And he had the
That
masculine
question
terms
is
like
revolutionary
accomplished.
for a lot
And
of
I'm like,
people,
I want to feel relaxed,
especially women.
rested,
And
calm.
that's how all of that was born.
And
I would do these speaking gigs. And I
yeah,
remember the first time I did a gig and I talked about making plans according to how you want to feel. And this redheaded female lawyer came up to me in tears and said, I have never considered that question. And she got in touch with me months later and said she quit her law firm and totally changed the design of her life. And I was like, okay. And women kept coming forward and saying, nobody ever asked me. And then I did this speaking gig once at UBC, University of British Columbia. And it was for the students. I forget what the group is, the graduating class, but this young woman had said, I said, oh, what's your major? What are you going to be when you grow up? And she said, well, I'm going to be an accountant. And I was like, oh, so like, you've got that math mind, you love numbers. And she said, oh no, this is what my father wants me to do. And I was like, Ma, how do you want to feel when when you're serving your clients? Never consider, oh, this isn't about how I want to feel. I was like, wow. My prediction for her potential for self-medicating 5 years out was high.
whoa. Yeah. Wow. You can just see it and sense it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's us living in alignment with other people's expectations of us.
Yeah. Totally out of alignment with ourselves. Yeah.
I went through these moments in my career too, where I would start working. This is my last agency. We were growing. We were crushing it. I would sit at my computer first thing in the morning. The first thing I did, grab a cup of coffee, open up my laptop, and start crushing the day. Yeah, not really good for the nervous system. And I would start to get these random panic attacks. Like I could feel my chest tightening up. And I was like, but why? What is the trigger? I wonder what the trigger was. Because I would look at the bank account. The bank account confirmed that I was doing the right thing because everything looked good on paper. But inside it was way too much. It was heavy. It was fast. It was very too much of me operating in my masculine. And there's nothing wrong with operating in your masculine, but that was almost intoxicating. And that's when I stopped getting my period, started getting hot flashes, all these things happening because my body's like, whoa, 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 don't do it this way anymore. And that's when I shut it down.
Good.
Yeah. Shut it down. And it's almost like life was breathed back into me. And I also felt this incredible guilt. And then I felt judged and I felt shame. Like, how can I give up this beautiful thing that I've grown and created? This identity that I've created in terms of being a powerhouse woman, a powerhouse couple. To what? Give an example to women of how not to do it. In a sense, it was a disgrace for me. But knowing it intuitively, this was the wrong thing to be doing. Oh man, moving on feels so good sometimes.
Most of the time.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
does. Okay, so I want to talk to you about relationships
Okay.
um, for many reasons. One is that, well, you just got married
I did.
and you published some content recently highlighting the 10 reasons relationships thrive. And I know that you and I share very similar values when it comes to relationships outside of an intimate relationship as well. Tell us a little bit about that and your findings, especially in all the years that you've built relationships, intimate or not, friendships or not. How do they thrive?
Uh, I think that we typically use our differences as excuses, as affirmations for why our needs aren't being met. I think so often in relationships, we're taught to, I mean, and especially women who are just becoming self realized, right? There's so much great discussion about boundaries, but excessive boundaries leads to adrenal fatigue and brittleness and over masculinized women. And so I think the antidote to that is to actually get really curious about your differences and start to approach them as like they're this kind of potential turn on or nectar for the relationship. How do you see it? I want to know how you see it. Why? How? What's the origin of that perspective? Wow, that's so different than I see it. So there's that. And then the the sort of the reward of that, or the next step of that, the offshoot of that, is that compromise starts to become a turn on, instead of like the ego saying, this works for me and this doesn't work for me, or he's meeting, she's meeting, not meeting my needs. And you become like we oriented instead of me oriented, which is the whole idea of like being in relationship, right? Like the win is actually in the compromise. You expand, they expand, you make something you didn't think was possible, you make room for the unexpected. The compromise is actually the power play. Yeah.
You would never think when you're in
You would
those moments.
never think.
No.
Yeah.
Dan always says that I show him where he's not free.
What does he mean by that?
So, I mean, we're doing all this very deep spiritual work. Um, we just did a couples retreat in Tofino. When I showed up, I thought 99% of it was going to be about Dan and I, but it was mostly about internal, how we show up, our triggers. What is it about the things in our relationship where we butt heads that has really nothing to do with the other person? Because a person who is really self actualized and on their path to enlightenment realize that nothing that happens in their life is because of them. And in terms of like emotional reaction to something. And I see myself testing this now too, even in the car this morning. My kids were arguing. And I was like, okay, Renee, has nothing to do with you, has nothing to do with you. So when we were sitting there eye to eye doing this work, we had these things that would come up. We eventually made agreement. So it's funny. The last hour of this 2-day disconnected, almost silent retreat was really doing the work that I thought the whole weekend was going to be about. And that was creating 5 new agreements for our life, agreements for our household or for our relationship. And so going back to understanding relationships and really holding a mirror up to him was like showing him where he's not free, because I triggered him, which meant that it really had nothing to do with me and everything to do with how he's processing that information.
Yeah.
So that goes back to trauma from childhood or inherited trauma, ancestral stuff. And he gets it. I get it. So now we got to be the generation that starts this healing process. That is a huge responsibility, but also very emotionally exhausting,
Yes.
but a beautiful journey. And at the end of the retreat, we're hugging our spiritual therapist, and there's 3 of us. And she's like, you both do realize that we've already done this before. We've already done this work, the 3 of us, which is kind of eerie, but at the same time, it was a beautiful thing knowing that the biggest takeaway for me was learning that the world is a better place because Dan and I are together.
Yes. 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 That's awesome.
That
Yeah.
it's hard sometimes when you're fighting and you're arguing and have disagreements, but
Yeah.
when you come back to that center,
Yes.
huh,
I know. Isn't it amazing? It's amazing.
yeah.
If we don't, um, I have a friend who says, "Don't give up before the miracle comes."
Mm.
And what I try to do with my guy, who I can now say my husband,
Yeah.
is when things are going really good, like when you just have the high moment, and you're usually like you're just so grateful to be together. I try and impress those moments upon my cells. Like I'll say to him, let's really remember this for when we hit the bumps. So we refer to them as bumps, and then I always say I'd rather be humping than bumping. Um, but for when we hit the bump, let's just put this sweetness in escrow. And now
Mm.
we have enough sweetness in the bank that when we hit the bumps, I'm just like, oh, this is brutal. Like he's so true. I cannot believe he said, I feel all that. And I just think, but we're going to get through this. This is just inevitable. I don't know how we're going to get through it. I don't know if it's going to be tonight before we go to bed. I don't know if it's going to take a weekend, but we will totally get through it. And then you double down. Not only will you get through it, you will be better. And that took us we haven't been together that long. It's only been about 2.5 years. But that took us about a year in. And that's all my self-help work, and some of which was like maybe new to him. And I was like, babe, because he would say, do we have to go through those bumps? I'd be like, babe, come on, look, we're better, stronger, sexier after every one of those ruptures.
Mhm.
And you can't deny that. So I'm just like, oh, we recently had one on our honeymoon week. And I just like, this is so pressurized and intense.
Yeah.
I know a diamond will come out of this. Only good could come out of how difficult this is right now.
Isn't that the idea of ikigai? Is that how you say it? Ikigai? The Japanese
Mm.
understanding that because the Japanese are really proud of the pottery that they create.
Oh, yeah.
And if a plate breaks, they used to mend it with a strip of gold.
Yeah. So beautiful. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So not only is it more beautiful, but potentially stronger than it was before.
Yeah.
And what used to be discarded waste is now a work of art.
Yes. That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
And more valuable. Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Love it. Love it.
So think about all those plates that you want to throw at the wall.
Yeah.
Some of them could work. They could turn to diamonds. All the ikigai everywhere.
That's a great metaphor. Yeah.
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 But so you guys have been together for a few years.
Yeah.
Not your first rodeo in terms of relationships.
No.
What is it about this union that is so perfectly imperfect for you guys? What is it in the lessons? Like bring those lessons in life. What is it that you guys are doing that makes it so beautiful?
We are game to grow, and my husband, it's still great and weird to say that. His name is Will, and Will is not what I expected, not what I was going after. He's not, in some respects, what I was trying to manifest. I was going to LA, New York all the time thinking, I'm going to marry like a baller who owns 10 companies and he's here. And that's not Will. Will is gentle, gentle. Will has been living of course, this all looks divine when you kind of pull back from it, but it's like, Will's been living 15 minutes away from me for 20 years.
No.
Just like lived in the next neighborhood.
Wow.
And it ended up that, what I could see was my wounded self, my unhealed self wanted hyper masculine baller king because I want to be able to just relax. Of course, I still want to be able to relax, being, fully feminine and all that that means. But it actually, the antidote for my woundedness is gentleness. And I got that in embodied form in a dude. It's incredibly, for me, incredibly healing. And it also, he needs me to be gentle. Like it's, I worked it into our wedding vows. Like I commit to gentle delivery because I can be pretty spicy. It's like I am loving, I am generous. There's no, I mean, I can really get gold stars on that on a regular basis. And when I am, what's the limerick? It's like when she's good, she was good. When she's awful, she's awful. My evil twin can be very cold and very aloof, really the opposite of my highest self. And he needs me to not be that. He needs me to be gentle and
Mhm.
less spicy. And in the beginning, I just like, oh, that's restrictive and that's not who I am. And I could just hear in my language all the stuff I identified with. You are threatening my identity of myself. This is not my personality. This is not how I've done it. This isn't all of me. No, he was calling me to be more of me and the truer me, which is actually quite gentle. Yeah.
Well, I think the world knows you as that gentle soul.
Yeah.
But also, I could sense I'm like, there's probably something a little spicy about her in moments.
Yeah.
I also have those moments too. And when I feel it come out, there's almost like, oh no, it's happening and this isn't me. And it makes the situation worse because you're
Mhm,
raging about something.
mhm, mhm.
um, so going back to the baller guy,
Yeah. Yeah.
by the way, I'm married to one.
Yeah. What
You do not necessarily live a more calm and gentle life because of the baller guy. It's maybe worse. Um, but isn't it funny how he lived right up the street? And it's like, I know God works in everything's a plan, it's in divine timing. But have there ever moments like, how did we not meet earlier? How was this not a thing early? And even 10 years ago, Danielle probably wouldn't have been ready to receive the will.
Yes. And we say that often. We wouldn't have been even attracted to each other. Um, but back to the point about baller and gentle, what it really gets down to, and I can see this with you and your man, is devotion.
Mm.
Right. So I had somebody say to me, my friend John Wineland, who's a teacher of the divine masculine, divine feminine relationship polarities, and he said, I was like, oh, do you know any hot evolved baller guys for me? Come on, all these guys in your men's workshops, you gotta know. And he's like, first of all, Danielle, I don't think most men would know what to do with you, but what you really need, he said, you could go for that baller match because I was in that mode of like I need someone to match my energy who's going to build dynasties with me and wants to save the world and clean up the oceans and all those things. And he said, but really I think what you need is devotion. And that actually, it stopped me, it softened me, and now I'm in a relationship with someone who leads from behind.
Mm.
And also, I'm going to do a podcast about this, but I live my life that I believe in the power of a vow. You talking about you coming up with your 5 agreements for your household and the relationship, etc. That's the power of a vow. That's where, we're letting our intention ride on words, and that is alchemy. And I'm really interested in teaching more about that. And this is a hallmark of the age of Aquarius and all the metaphysical things. But our vow changed us. We could feel the alchemy of standing up in front of friends and making this promise. And my revelation was that I think of a lot of us in this, in our space, right? In this wellness industry. we want to find our king. The dudes want to find their queens. I have so many conversations with baller guys. They're just like, can you introduce me to my queen? And that's still such a searching for power outside of ourselves. It's not actually an equal mating, you could say, right? It's like, you're going to be my king. It's, what A Course in Miracles talks about, the special relationship. I'm going to be with somebody who's awesome in all these ways so that I feel awesome about myself. And our experience of getting married was, the threshold we crossed with that vow was, and now you're a king, and now I'm a queen, and now we're together. It was that was the reward of loving each other as is, not totally evolved, messy, imperfect, amazing, all those things. We become that together.
That is so beautiful. It's like you now, okay, where my brain's all over the place with this, because we always look for that compliment outside of ourselves, but it's already within us. And the king, the queen becomes the king and queen when that union is made, when the vows are exchanged,
Yeah.
when those agreements are made, which I wrote down. I want to renew my vows of Dan because now we have something so different.
How long have you been married?
9 years.
9 years. Yeah, and maybe 10-year anniversary. Wouldn't that be?
Yes.
Sweet.
Italy. Went back to Italy.
All right.
Yeah, 100%. Because we've evolved. And probably the person that has taught me the most about myself is my husband.
No doubt. And
Yeah.
shouldn't it be that way? Like, that's so interesting because I think, the people who we're spending the most time with and we're committed to, they should be teaching us the most about ourselves.
Yeah.
And, and this is an Esther Perel-ism, is in modern relationships, we've been training ourselves to get all of our needs met from one person, and it just doesn't work. And it's such a setup to have the other person be a failure. And this goes back to what we were saying top of the hour, just like, you're not meeting my needs. Beg your needs. Relationship is not all about getting your needs met. It just isn't. And if you base it on that, all your needs met, you will never be happy. You can't even meet all of your needs.
And what responsibility you're putting on somebody else.
Yeah, it's pretty heavy.
That was a huge realization too, because I remember Dan saying, is he worried that he could not make me happy? Oh. That was one of his biggest worries. And I was like, oh, like he feels that way. That's his relative truth, but that's not his responsibility. That is mine. That is mine to know what makes me happy and to do the work to make me happy. He can be the guide and the support.
And let's pull in a little Thich Nhat Hanh, little Buddhism here, because an additional way, not opposite, I would add to this way to look at relationships is, I feel that my job is to make my man happy. Do you know what I mean? So like, I'm totally with you. I completely agree. Like, it's an inside job for everybody. It's a heavy responsibility if you put that on someone. And both are true. My job is to show up and how can I help him be more healed, be happier, be more delighted, be stronger, all those things. My job is to be loving. That's my commitment. And I feel a lot of freedom in that, actually.
But and you got me thinking, it's almost, it's you just being you gives that to him. So when you're doing that work to understand your relative truth, that self-actualization, the sovereignty, when you do that work, you automatically give that to him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But most people just don't do that. They don't understand it's within them, right? My friend Claire says, turn your edges inwards. That's where the work begins and ends.
Yes, that is, if there were such thing as a formula, that's the formula.
We just did it.
You do the work.
What would that smell like? That was an actual, a little peppermint, a little rosemary. I don't know.
That's such a great question. I think, let's talk about that. Let's make an essential oil. I think it would smell like rose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, rose has such symbolism in Christianity and so many forms of mysticism, and I think it would smell like rose with some salt and pepper.
Are you hungry? Definitely rose.
Mm.
Um, but it's so interesting because scent is the highest memory trigger.
Yes,
So
yes.
if you're actually doing that work, then you create that concoction. Like I have my new altar set up. I am identifying as a witch,
Mhm.
um, to create that concoction, tincture, whatever it is for that smell is
Mm.
really important. And we used to do this thing with my son Max. Whenever he would start to spiral, he would get in these like really crazy moods and he would just spiral. Um, we actually would hold up a Vicks Vapor Rub stick to his nose. Here's how this worked, totally off on a tangent. Anytime he was super happy and excited about something in his life, we'd have him smell it. So then all of a sudden he's creating that association with the Vicks Vapor Rub and being happy. When
Brilliant.
he started to spiral, and it would help him. It wouldn't stop it all the time, but it would definitely help him because now his brain's like, happy, happy. And we're shoving this, and what a random smell, too, but you don't actually just walk around with that smell everywhere.
This is the foundation of working with essential oils as plant medicine.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. You know where you should head is next time you come to Vancouver, you need to go to a place. It's next to Banyan on Broadway called Durga,
Okay.
Durga. And the man who owns Durga and he sells like all of these beautiful artifacts from India, incredible stuff. He's one of the most knowledgeable people I've met on essential oils. And there is oil that smells like sex, and there is oil that smells like gentleness. And go if you're concocting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Totally. Does he do workshops or anything? I feel like I go reach
Oh,
out to
but you
this
should bring
person.
him in. He's amazing. He's really
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah.
Okay. So going back to this formula that we've established now, we can just sell enlightenment in a bottle now.
We just solved
Easy.
all relationship dilemmas.
Talk about capitalism.
Do you want to talk about capitalism?
Oh God, we don't have enough time for this.
Uh,
But we could. Let's just a little double click on that because this is hugely threaded into relationships and
Okay.
everything. Yeah.
But here's how I would make the connection. Let's just replace the word capitalism. Let's go for the dark side, the shadow side of capitalism, which we could call toxic patriarchy,
Mhm.
which isn't down on the divine masculine. It's excessive masculinity. So this is a relationship between capitalism and toxic patriarchy. The patriarchy is always looking for a deal. It is opposite of generous, and it will exploit everything. So it is inherently insensitive. It does not take the needs of everybody into consideration. So it just extracts. And then you end up with not everybody gets to the table, and you end up with war and adrenal fatigue, the whole range, everything from, genocide to excessive cortisol dumps in your hormonal system. Like, it's all the things. So the opposite of that is really the antidote to that is the divine feminine.
Mhm.
And that is inclusive, naturally inclusive. How is everybody here doing? What are the needs of everybody in the room? You may
Mhm.
need a little more. Well, that's what you need today. And it gives me joy to give it to you. It's not extractive, it's generous. It believes that there's an unlimited supply to meet everybody's needs. And that's the future.
Okay. Can we start that today? When does it begin?
Let's get on it. Yeah. Yeah.
Man, this spiritual journey has been the most clarifying thing. And
Mhm.
I learned this past weekend that I'm a mystic. I always knew this, but never actually confessed to it because I'm like, what's a mystic?
Mhm.
So I'm learning. My I have now signed up to get my own master's of feminine divinity and consciousness. It's just reading the books that the greats read or wrote. And that's my own study. You
Good.
should see the stack. It's huge. And also my altar is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. All the more reason to collect crystals and feathers.
Oh, so
Yeah.
happy for you.
Yes, you're the perfect person for this conversation. So your episode did it go live recently? The 10 reasons relationships
Yes,
thrive?
I
Okay.
think that is episode 116.
Okay.
And there's lots of counter intuitive nuggets in there. Just kind of how I roll.
I gotta go check it out.
Mhm.
So what is in store for you relationship wise
Mm.
in the next couple months or year?
Oh, I'm gonna stay soft. And we were just talking last night about what we want to build. Like, what's the purpose of marriage? It's funny, we didn't ask ourselves that before we actually got married.
Mm.
And it's building. It's building. Like, it's the sweetness of the compromise. It's better together than apart. It's I want to help. I want to celebrate regulated nervous systems, which I really think should be the priority for every human alive during these crazy times. Just get your
Totally.
nervous system on track, and you will heal the world. And we want to serve. We want to serve. We want to use our love as a form of community service. Yeah.
I love that.
Mm.
And some people might think they want that too. And then they ask, how? How do I do that?
Mm. Um, speak kindly to yourself, which will help regulate your nervous system, which will have you think more clearly about what your body and mind actually need. I think all wellness begins with your inner tone,
Mm.
and then you make good decisions.
You do make good decisions. Okay, I love this. I do have one last question for you.
Yeah.
When I ask you what it means to be a wild woman, what is that to you?
Oh, a wild woman. Well, the first word that comes to mind is sincerity,
Mm.
because if I'm going to be sincere, no matter where I am, sometimes I will be considered wild. Sometimes I will be considered prudish, too whatever, too new age, too Catholic, too entrepreneurial, too whatever. But just keep showing up as myself. And it doesn't mean, this is the nuance for me these days, being yourself does not mean speaking your truth all the time.
Oof.
Sometimes your higher self is going to guide you to sit at the back of the room and be quiet, because that's love for you. That's love for the people in the room. Sometimes you're going to have to grab the mic. Sometimes you're going to have to take to social media and be very clear.
Yeah.
But your heart will cue you, best thing to do in any given circumstance. And I think that often looks pretty wild. Yeah.
That's so damn wild.
Mhm.
Yeah. I had a grab the mic moment the other day. I have a friend of mine who is on a sober journey
Mm.
and happened to resubscribe to a summertime activity that is just exposes her to alcohol.
Mhm.
And I used to be passive about it. And I was like, this time I go, do you think this is actually the right move, knowing that there's a lot of triggers? And she was like, I felt guilty because I didn't want to think I was angry with her, but also I needed her to know that I know she's denying the essence of what that activity meant. So
The great thing about that is framing it as a question.
that's a good point.
So good.
Okay, now I got to go look. Did I frame it as a question? Did Danielle Laporte said?
Well played. And if you didn't, like, that's cool. I mean, that's the license of girlfriends. Sometimes you just say, listen, girlfriend,
It was a question.
get it together. Yeah. Or you say, do you think
I
that's a
did.
good idea?
I go, any chance it could be a trigger? Question mark.
Good. Oh my, that's open love. That's, how I describe that? I mean, other than like just good leadership, is that's a karma-free question.
Right. So it leaves it up to her to ponder
Yep.
or answer or not.
I did not tell you what to do. Just asking.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Perfect. That was my truth, but intuition grabbing the mic, saying, let's go, sister. Okay. You got to get back to your honeymoon.
Yeah.
But where can people go to find you online?
DanielleLaporte.com. And the cool thing about that is 2 Fridays a month, I do a newsletter called Sacred Weekends. And that's really kind of the entry point into all my stuff. And then, Instagram, I'm everywhere.
Yeah, you are. I love you. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah. Thank you, Renee Warren.